You know just how many iOS and Android games come out every month, and that's why we weed through them to get you the best ones. I'm Falcon, and today on GameRanks, here's the top 10 best new iOS and Android games of February 2017. Quick disclaimer, this is a paid games list. The free games list will come in a couple days. Number 10 is Slayaway Camp, which is a sliding puzzle game with a deceivingly simple graphical style. It'll remind you of Minecraft and Crossy Road until blood flies everywhere. It's essentially a play on all of the old camp-style horror movies. It's a really great take on the slider puzzle, which has somehow been a genre that's given us a lot of really good takes, especially recently. But I'd say this one stands above a lot of them, both in presentation and especially the music. Oh, it's good. Slayaway Camp is currently available on iOS and PC, but will be hitting Android quote-unquote soon. Number 9 is Stagehand, which is a really awesome take on an infinite runner / platformer. Instead of having you jump, run, and do all of that stuff, you have an infinite runner character who never stops, and you slide the landscape up and down. They're calling it a reverse platformer, and I would say that's a pretty apt description. The graphics are really good too. The character's face reacts to environments in a way that is, well, for people like myself, funny. Not like uproarious laughter or anything, but it's a really fun, engrossing game that you can literally play forever because there's no set levels, and the various sets of pixel art will remind you of some, well, let's just say, enjoyable classics. Stagehand, a reverse platformer, is currently out on iOS. Number 8 is Strange Telephone, a point-and-click adventure game, or as we could call it nowadays, a tap adventure game, which takes place in a strange dimension where you dial numbers on a phone to get to various different areas. Now, aside from the standard adventure game mechanics, you have a essentially limited amount of moves in order to get yourself out of the strange dimension, and at first you're basically having to randomly dial numbers. In fact, there's a lot of degrees of randomness in the game, and that's essentially what makes it different. It's a decidedly weird game with good pixel art and absolutely phenomenal chiptune music that I gotta add fits the mood just perfectly. It's one of those games that pulls off mysterious without having to be super mechanically interesting. Like, I'm not going to say that you're going to be like, this was the most innovative adventure game I've ever played. It's not. But it adds enough to it to where it's worth playing and has enough personality to feel different. Strange Telephone is out on iOS and Android. Number 7 is The Book of Unwritten Tales 2, which, if you remember the original, it is one of the funniest and most engrossing point-and-click games out there, period. And the second game of the series does everything it can to improve upon the first, and definitely does it. If you can manage to play the first one before this one, it makes more sense, but it's possible to play this one without having played the first. There's a lot of very inventive puzzles in the game, and a lot of great pop culture references to things that are mystical and fantasy-oriented, like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and even Game of Thrones, though it's sort of more historical fiction with a little bit of mysticism thrown in. It's a very pretty game, it's got a great story, and it'll crack you up. Book of Unwritten Tales 2 is out on iOS, Android, and Steam. Number 6, Causality is a phenomenal puzzle game that essentially works around the idea of time. You have a few astronauts or explorer types who are set out among a path, and on that path there are various obstacles. You have to get through those obstacles in order to beat the level, but a lot of the trial and error involves moving backwards in time and changing the direction of an arrow. The arrow will send your little astronaut guy off in a certain direction. There are portals, and it's one of those games where I wouldn't call it exciting, but I would call it involving. This is one of those games that will get your brain going, and I always like it when somebody actually comes up with an original concept for a new puzzle game. Causality is out on both iOS and Android. Number 5 is Warlock's Tower, which is a movement-oriented puzzle/action game that goes for not only the Game Boy graphical aesthetic, but upgrades the chiptune sounds of what one might expect in a Game Boy game, with quiet little flourishes of other instruments, and its extremely involving soundtrack. Now, in the game, every single step that you take takes a little life away from you, and your best bet is simply trying to do it in the least amount of moves, getting the most amount of extra lives. Now, the first stretch of the game is a little bit simple, but it does get a bit harder. That being said, once it does, there are nice little hints dropped in the titles of every level, and at pretty much every point, this game had me riveted. Warlock's Tower is out on iOS, Android, and Steam. Number 4 is Dungeon Rushers, which is a turn-based, action-packed, kinda nostalgia-a-thon, but kinda not. The way the game describes the world of the game is offbeat, and I would say that that's pretty accurate. You have kind of a weird combo of some sort of company/evil dominion that you're fighting against. Essentially, it's raiding dungeons and participating in turn-based battles, as well as multiplayer PvP battles as well. It's a game that comes together in a great way with a crafting system as well as a dungeon building system. So essentially, it's every single thing you could want from this type of concept, and it's all done really well. Dungeon Rushers is out on iOS, Android, and Steam. Number 3 is Mall Mash Tabba Gal Gal, and I don't know if I'm saying that right, and I don't care. It's basically built on the concept of Pong, except the goal isn't really just to keep the ball in play, though you do have to do that. The real goal is to beat the enemies that come up on screen. They continually appear from the bottom of the screen, moving upward. It's very simple to understand what's going on, but it does get kind of chaotic in a good way, and even has a little bit of that Downwell ingenuity in it, in that you get to buy upgrades between levels. It's got hand-drawn, hand-animated graphics. It's a very pretty game, and has easily one of the most unique art styles I've seen, although I'm not sure I would call it exactly aesthetically pleasing, and I'm sure that it's on purpose because it is very pretty still. Mall Mash Tabba Gal Gal is out on iOS. Number 2 is A Boy and His Blob, which, yes, is the old NES classic, but completely reimagined. This is a game that has absolutely amazing graphics. It pretty much retains all the original mechanics of the classic, and Majesco did a very good job making it feel like the old game without making it feel old. It actually retains a lot of the elements, but instead looks more like the PlayStation 1 versions of Rayman in its graphical style than an old NES game. When this game was remade onto the Wii, it really didn't get a hell of a lot of attention, but it's great that it finally is. It's technically not released on Android. It's kind of a early access style release, but I gotta recommend it. It is a great game. It's also available on Steam as well. And finally, number 1, Hidden Folks is a really, really cool game. Now, if you enjoyed Where's Waldo or Where's Wally books, depending on where in the world you grew up when you were a kid, this is a game that you'll understand immediately. However, there is a level of interactivity among the world, despite it being fully black and white, that just never existed in even the colorful books. Now, this game is profoundly funny, like you will crack up as you are playing this game. There's way more to do than specifically find someone as well, because there's about a million little things to find beyond the actual targets. This game is so dense with activity and enjoyable and fun and just, for lack of a better word, whimsical. This is something that I think you will really enjoy if you give it a shot, and you can on iOS and PC right now, as well as Android soon. What was your favorite iOS or Android game this month? Leave it in the comments. We're interested to hear from you. We're hoping it's one of the ones we picked because we liked all these games. If not, though, we're still interested to try out something new. And if you enjoyed this video, please click like. If you're not subscribed, now is a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and we thank you very much for watching this one. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero, and we'll see you next time right here on GameRanks.